The sun was lowering itself behind the prairie like an old man, easing into a chair he had earned. Lights stretched long and amber across the land, brushing the tall grass until it bent and shimmered like it was remembering something it had once known. The wind moved slowly here. It always did, as if it understood that some places carried too much history to be rushed. At the edge of the road, where dust lifted with every passing breeze, a young woman walked alone. She carried one small suitcase. Its corners were softened by time, its leather cracked in places where hands had held on too tightly. It had been with her longer than most people had. It held everything she owned and almost nothing she needed. She walked toward the town without looking up at it. Not yet. She had learned that looking too soon made rejection hurt deeper. The town stood quiet, wooden buildings lined up like tired men who had seen more winters than they cared to count. Paint peeled in soft curls. Signs creaked on rusted hinges. Porches were occupied by still figures pretending not to watch. But they were watching. They always watched newcomers. Her boots pressed into the dirt with a sound barely louder than a breath. She walked straight, shoulders back, not proud, not defeated, just steady. People would later say they knew the moment she didn't belong. They would say it was the way she walked. Too careful, too contained, as if she was used to rooms where voices could turn sharp without warning. She stopped in front of the general store. For a moment, she stood there, fingers resting on the handle of her suitcase. The wood beneath her palm was warm from the sun. That warmth felt like something she could almost trust. Inside, the store smelled of flour and old paper and iron nails. Shelves lined the walls in quiet obedience. Behind the counter stood the owner, a man whose hair had gone gray before his eyes had learned kindness. He looked up, paused. She spoke first. Her voice was calm, low, practiced. She said she was looking for work. Any work. Cleaning. Sorting. Helping. The man did not ask her name. His gaze slid over her face, her hands, the suitcase by her feet. He hesitated just long enough for hope to rise and bruise itself against her ribs. Then he shook his head. He said the town was full. He said business was slow. He said it wouldn't be right. His voice was not cruel. That almost made it worse. She nodded once, thanked him, turned away before her eyes could betray her. Outside, the porch creaked beneath her weight, though she moved as lightly as she could. She felt eyes on her back again. Always eyes. She crossed the street to the boarding house next. The woman there barely let her finish speaking. Her mouth tightened before the words even landed. She said no vacancies. No need for help. No trouble. Trouble. The word lingered in the air like dust that refused to settle. The young woman stepped back onto the street. Her chest felt hollow now, the way it always did when she realized she was once again unwanted without having done anything at all. She had learned to recognize this feeling. It was familiar, like an ache that came with the weather. She did not argue, did not plead. She had learned that too. Instead, she walked down the length of the town, past the blacksmith, past the church whose doors stood open, but whose welcome did not extend far enough. Whispers followed her, soft at first, then bolder. Some said they had heard about her. Some said she carried bad fortune. Some said she looked like the kind of woman trouble found easily. No one said it to her face. That night, as the sky darkened into deep indigo and stars blinked awake one by one, she found herself standing near the edge of town. A fence marked where order ended and land stretched wild again. She leaned against one of the posts and let herself breathe. This was not her first town. It would not be her last. She knew that even now. Her past followed her the way dust followed wagons. No matter how far she traveled, it always arrived just after she did. Once, she had worked in a fine house. She had scrubbed floors until her knees ached and her hands cracked. She had spoken little and listened much. And when a man with influence decided to lie, the truth had not mattered. No one had asked her what happened. They had simply decided. That was how it always went. The following morning, she returned to town at first light. There was a man she had noticed the day before, younger than the others. A ranch owner, by the look of his boots and his confident stride. He had smiled when their eyes met just briefly. That smile had stayed with her through the night like a question that had not yet been asked. She found him near the livery stable. He greeted her easily. Too easily. He said he might have work. Said she could help around the ranch for a few days. Said she looked capable. Her chest loosened just a fraction. They walked together as he talked. He asked where she was from, though not with real interest. More as habit. She answered vaguely. She had learned not to give the past more space than it demanded. But as they passed others in town, his steps slowed. People watched. Brows furrowed. Voices dropped. By the time they reached the end of the street, his smile had thinned. He stopped walking. Said he needed to think about it. Said folks talked. Said reputation mattered. He did not meet her eyes when he said it. She nodded again. That same small nod. The one she used when she understood more than she wished she did. He apologized. Quickly, as if apology could replace courage. She walked away without looking back. This rejection cut deeper than the others. Not because it was louder, but because it had almost been kindness. Cowardice often wore the mask of politeness. By evening, the town felt colder. She did not try again. She sat by the fence at the edge of town, suitcase at her side, knees drawn close to her chest. The wind moved through the grass, carrying the distant sound of laughter from a saloon she had not entered and never would. She watched the sky change colors, watched the world continue without her. Her hands rested on her knees, still and steady. She did not cry, not because she did not feel the weight of it all, but because she had cried before, and tears had never changed anyone's mind. She whispered to herself instead. Not a prayer, not a plea, just a reminder. She was still here, still standing, still worthy of being seen. Behind her, in the town she did not belong to, lights flickered on one by one, and not a single soul had asked her the one question that mattered. What happened to you? The night answered with silence, and the wind carried that silence across the prairie, toward a future not yet revealed. Morning came slowly, as it often did on the prairie. It did not burst into the sky. It unfolded. Light spilled gently over the horizon, brushing the tall grass with pale gold, touching the wooden edges of the town as if asking permission to begin again. She had not slept much. The ground near the fence was hard, and the wind had shifted in the night, colder than before. But she had learned how to rest without comfort. She rose before the town stirred, smoothing her dress with quiet dignity, brushing dust from her sleeves as though it were something temporary. The world did not owe her gentleness. Still, she carried her own. She lifted her suitcase and began walking again. Not toward the town this time, but along its edge. There was a stillness in the early hour that felt kinder than daylight. Fewer eyes, fewer judgments. That was when she noticed him. He stood beyond the last row of buildings, near a wagon stacked with feed sacks. His hat cast a shadow over his brow, but there was nothing sharp in the way he watched the morning. He seemed to belong to the land more than to the town. Broad-shouldered, steady, unhurried. He had seen her the night before. Not staring, not prying, just noticing. He stepped toward her now, boots pressing softly into the dirt. She braced herself without meaning to. People did not approach her gently. They approached with curiosity or suspicion, rarely with quiet. He stopped a few feet away, not too close. The space between them felt respectful. For a moment, he said nothing at all. The wind moved between them, carrying the scent of hay and distant cattle. Somewhere a horse shifted in its stall. Then he asked, simply, "What happened to you?" No accusation, no edge, no demand, just a question. It startled her more than anger ever had. She searched his face for mockery, for hidden doubt, for the flicker of judgment she had come to expect. There was none, only patience, the kind that waits without pressing. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Words had often been used against her. Truth had a way of shrinking under scrutiny. He did not rush her. He did not fill the silence with guesses. He simply stood there, hat in hand now, as if this moment deserved respect. Finally she spoke. Her voice was low, steady but thin at the edges. She said she worked hard. She said someone with influence decided she was convenient to blame. She said no one asked for proof. No one asked her. The story came in pieces. Not dramatic, not loud, just facts laid gently on the ground between them. He listened the way a man listens to rain after a long drought. Not interrupting, not correcting, letting it fall. When she finished, the silence returned. But it felt different now. Less heavy, less lonely. He nodded once. I see. That was all. Not I'm sorry. Not I doubt it. Not I need more. Just I see. And somehow that was enough. He shifted his weight slightly, glancing toward the stretch of land beyond town. About a ranch just past the ridge, he said. Work's honest. Days are long. Pays fair. Room in the loft if you don't mind early mornings. He looked at her then, fully. I don't need perfection. I need honesty. The words settled into her chest like something warm. She had been measured so often by rumor, by assumption, by someone else's version of her life. Honesty. It felt like being seen without distortion. She did not answer right away. Trust was not something she handed out easily anymore. It had been taken before and returned broken. He seemed to understand that too. You can say no, he added quietly. I won't think less of you. That might have been the moment she realized he was different. Not because he offered help, but because he offered choice. She lifted her chin slightly. I don't mind hard work, she said. A faint smile touched his mouth. Not triumphant, not possessive, just simple acknowledgement. Good. They walked together toward the edge of town. Eyes followed again. Whispers gathered like clouds preparing to rain. A woman on a porch leaned toward her neighbor. A man outside the saloon folded his arms. He noticed. Of course he did. But he did not change his stride. The ranch sat beyond a low hill where the land opened wide and unguarded. Fences stretched like careful lines across the earth. A barn stood sturdy against the horizon. The house was modest but solid, built with intention rather than decoration. It was not grand. It was real. He showed her the loft first. A small space above the barn, sunlight slipping through narrow slats. Clean hay stacked neatly to one side. A narrow cot against the wall. It was more than she had expected, more than she had dared to hope. You'll earn your keep, he said gently. Not charity. I don't want charity, she replied. Good, he answered. The days that followed were quiet in their rhythm. She rose before dawn, learned the patterns of the horses, the timing of feed, the careful art of mending fence lines without wasting wire. He worked alongside her, not above her. When she made mistakes, he corrected them without humiliation. When she succeeded, he simply nodded, as though he had expected nothing less. Back in town, the talk grew louder. They said he was foolish. They said he would regret it. They said some stains did not wash clean. But he did not argue. He bought supplies as usual, paid his accounts, tipped his hat when greeted. If anyone asked directly, he answered plainly. She works hard. He did not defend her with speeches. He defended her with consistency. One evening, after a long day of mending a broken fence under the heat of the sun, she sat on the barn steps watching the sky turn soft and blue. He joined her, setting down a tin cup beside her without comment. For a while they sat in silence, the kind that feels companionable rather than awkward. I'm not used to this, she admitted quietly. Used to what? Being asked, she said. He studied the horizon. Most folks don't ask because they're afraid of the answer. She considered that, and you're not afraid. He shook his head slightly. I've learned the loudest stories aren't always the truest ones. The wind moved through the grass again, gentler this time. Something inside her, something tightly wound for months, began to loosen. Not all at once, but enough. That night, she slept deeply, not because the loft was soft, but because for the first time in a long while, she felt chosen for her effort, not judged for her past. The world had not changed overnight. The town still whispered, but beneath the wide western sky, on a ranch where honesty weighed more than rumor, a small shift had begun. It started with one question, and the patience to hear the answer. The ranch had its own language. It spoke in hoofbeats before sunrise, in the low murmur of cattle shifting through morning mist, in the rhythm of water poured into troughs, and the soft scrape of boots across barnwood. She learned that language slowly. At first she moved through her tasks carefully, as though the land itself might reject her if she stepped too loudly. But the prairie did not judge the way people did. It only responded to patience. Each morning began the same. A pale sky, cool air, the scent of hay and earth rising together. He would already be awake when she climbed down from the loft. Coffee brewed strong over the stove. 2 tin cups set out without ceremony. He did not speak much before sunrise, and she was grateful for that. Silence felt different here. It did not accuse. Work filled the hours. Mending fences beneath a wide, forgiving sky. Brushing down horses whose warm breath curled into the cold air. Hauling water until her arms ached in a way that felt honest rather than humiliating. He worked beside her, not watching to catch mistakes, not hovering to correct, simply present. The steadiness of him began to settle into her bones. There was an older ranch hand who came twice a week. His back bent like a question mark shaped by too many winters. He studied her the first morning with narrowed eyes, as if measuring her strength against rumor. By the second week, he was showing her how to tie a better knot. By the third, he was leaving half his midday bread beside her tools without comment. Respect on the prairie was not declared. It was earned in dust and sweat. A widow from a neighboring property would pass by, sometimes with her small wagon. She carried eggs and quiet observations. At first her gaze lingered on the young woman with something cautious in it. But caution softened when she saw the girl kneeling in mud to help a newborn calf breathe. Softened further when she noticed how carefully she handled the horses, how gently she spoke to them as if they understood more than people did. One afternoon, the widow left a jar of preserves on the porch without knocking. Nothing was said. Everything was understood. Even the child from the neighboring farm began visiting. A boy no older than 8, freckles scattered across his nose like spilled grain. He asked too many questions and never seemed embarrassed by them. Why do you work so hard? Did you always live here? Do horses remember things? She answered each one with patience, sometimes with a smile she did not realize she was wearing. The boy trusted her easily. Children often did. Weeks passed. The town still whispered, but its voice grew fainter against the steady rhythm of ranch life. Work had a way of proving what words could not. One evening a storm rolled in without warning. The sky darkened not with anger, but with weight. Clouds gathered low and heavy, pressing the air flat against the earth. Thunder did not crack violently. It rolled deep and distant, like something ancient turning in its sleep. They moved quickly to secure the barn doors, guiding the horses inside before rain began to fall. Water came in sheets. The barn roof rattled under its force. Lantern light flickered uncertainly, shadows stretching long across wooden beams. Inside the loft, she sat with her knees drawn up, listening to the storm press against the walls. He climbed the ladder a moment later, bringing an extra lantern. "Didn't want you sitting in the dark," he said quietly. The rain softened to a steady drum. For a while they listened without speaking. Storms had a way of loosening guarded things. She did not look at him when she began. "The man who accused me," she said, "was respected, wealthy, used to being believed." Her voice did not tremble, but it carried something raw. "He offered me kindness at first, said I worked harder than the others, said I deserved better. When I refused his attention, the kindness turned." She swallowed. Money went missing from his study. "He said he saw me near the door. That was enough." Outside, lightning flickered through cracks in the barn walls. "Did anyone ask for proof?" he asked gently. She shook her head. His word carried weight. Mine carried suspicion. Silence filled the space again, but it felt fuller now. Honest. He leaned forward slightly, forearms resting on his knees. "I believe you." There was no flourish in the statement, no heroic tone, just certainty. The words struck deeper than she expected. She had told this story before, to employers, to strangers, to herself in lonely nights when doubt crept in like cold air under a door, but never had someone answer that way. Not with hesitation, not with caution, just belief. Her throat tightened, not with tears she would hide, but with relief she had not prepared for. The storm outside began to ease. Rain softened. Thunder drifted farther away. Something inside her shifted too, not healed completely. Wounds do not close that quickly, but steadied. After that night, the space between them changed. It did not become romantic in any loud or sudden way. There were no grand confessions, no stolen glances meant to ignite. Instead, there was ease. He began asking her opinion about small things. Fence placement, feed schedules, whether to sell 2 calves before winter. Her thoughts mattered. She began leaving small touches around the house. Fresh wildflowers in a chipped jar. Bread baked carefully, though she worried over its texture. He noticed, always noticed. One late afternoon, they stood side by side watching the horizon melt into shades of gold and rose. The land stretched endless before them, quiet and breathing. "You don't look like you're waiting anymore," he said softly. "Waiting for what?" "For somewhere to send you away." She considered that. "Maybe I'm not." He nodded, as if that was the most natural thing in the world. Love did not arrive like thunder between them. It arrived like steady rain that seeps into dry earth. Unannounced, persistent, life-giving. One morning, she caught herself humming while brushing down a horse. The sound startled her. It had been a long time since music rose from her without effort. The older ranch hand noticed too. "Good to hear that," he muttered, pretending not to smile. The boy from next door began calling the ranch her place when speaking to others. The widow stayed longer during visits, sharing stories from her own youth. The town still remembered its rumors. But the ranch remembered her work, and the man beside her remembered her truth. Under that wide western sky, something fragile began to bloom, not because the world suddenly turned kind, but because one steady soul chose to ask and then chose to believe. And sometimes that is enough to start a life again. Autumn arrived without announcement. The prairie shifted from green to amber, as though the land itself were exhaling something old. The mornings grew sharper. Breath rose visible in the air. The cattle moved slower, heavy with the coming cold. By then, she no longer felt like a visitor on a ranch. Her boots had worn paths into the soil. Her laughter had settled into the wood of the house. Her presence was stitched into the rhythm of the days. She did not wait to be told what needed doing. She knew, and he trusted that knowing. The town, too, had grown quieter in its suspicion. Not silent, but softer. Work had a way of reshaping opinions that gossip could not hold together forever. Then one afternoon, the wind shifted. Dust rose along the main road as a polished carriage rolled into town. It moved differently from wagons that belonged there. Cleaner, louder in its pride. Some recognized it immediately. Others felt the change without knowing why. She had ridden into town that day for supplies. Flour, lamp oil, thread for mending. Ordinary things that mark an ordinary life. She stepped out of the general store with her parcel tucked beneath her arm, and saw him, the man who had once turned a room against her with a single lie. Time had not softened him. It had only sharpened his confidence. His coat was finely tailored, his boots untouched by honest dust. His eyes found her. Recognition flickered, then something colder. He stepped closer, not enough to cause a scene, but enough to let the air tighten. "Well now," he said, voice smooth as polished wood. "I see the frontier hasn't changed your habits." She felt it then, that old sensation of a room turning invisible around her, of voices preparing to choose sides before facts were spoken. People nearby slowed, listening without appearing to. She did not step back. The months on the ranch had given her something steadier than anger. He continued, loud enough for others to hear. "I do hope the good people here know who they've taken in." The words were shaped carefully, suggestive, not direct. A man practiced in planting doubt without planting evidence. A familiar tremor began at the edge of her ribs. Not fear, memory. Before she could answer, another voice entered the space. Calm, even, unhurried. "Where is your proof?" The rancher had stepped beside her. He had not rushed forward in fury, had not raised his voice. He simply stood there, hat in hand, posture relaxed but immovable. The wealthy man turned, surprised more by the tone than the challenge. "Proof?" "Yes," the rancher said. "You've made an accusation before. I'd like to see the proof of it." A small crowd had gathered now. The store owner, the widow, the older ranch hand who had come into town that morning for nails. Silence spread like a hell breath. The wealthy man's smile thinned. "My word has always been enough." The rancher nodded slightly. "Maybe where you come from, but not here." The words were not aggressive. They were steady, grounded in something the prairie understood. The widow stepped forward then. Her voice not loud, but clear. She's worked harder than most men I've known. Fed my cattle when I was sick. Never asked for praise. The older ranch hand cleared his throat. I watched her count every coin twice. Honest hands don't shake the way a liar's do. Hers never have. The store owner shifted uncomfortably. He remembered the day he had refused her. Remembered the way she had thanked him anyway. The wealthy man glanced around, perhaps expecting agreement. Perhaps expecting the familiar ease of belief without question. Instead, he found faces waiting. Waiting for evidence. Waiting for substance. He had none. The wind moved through the street, lifting dust between them all. He adjusted his coat. I have business elsewhere, he muttered. And like that, the authority he once carried seemed smaller. Not destroyed, just exposed as hollow. He turned and walked back toward his carriage. No one stopped him. No one defended him either. When the carriage rolled away, it did not look powerful. It looked out of place. The crowd dispersed slowly. Not with cheers, not with applause, just with a quiet shift. The rancher turned to her. "You all right?" She realized her hands were steady. "Yes," she said, and she meant it. Something had ended in that moment. Not because he had defended her, but because the town had required proof instead of reputation. Because she had stood without shrinking. They walked back toward the ranch together as the sun dipped low. The prairie seemed wider than before. At the fence line, he stopped. There was no crowd now, no audience. Just open land stretching endlessly beneath the sky, painted in copper and violet. He faced her fully. "You don't owe me anything," he said quietly. "You never did." She held his gaze. "But I'd like to ask something anyway." The wind slowed, as if listening. "Will you stay? Not as hired help. Not because you have nowhere else, but because you want to." The question settled gently between them. She thought of the first night by the fence post, of the doors that had closed without hearing her name, of the question no one had asked, and then of mornings filled with shared coffee, of storms weathered in steady silence, of belief offered without condition. She had come here carrying only a suitcase. Now she carried belonging. "Yes," she said, not breathless, not dramatic, just certain. The months that followed did not blaze with spectacle. They deepened. A small gathering was held at the ranch before winter settled in fully. The widow brought preserve again. The older ranch hand stood straighter than usual. Even the store owner came. Hat low in apology, he did not yet know how to speak aloud. There were no grand speeches, just warmth, shared food, quiet acknowledgement. She stood beside him not as someone rescued, but as someone chosen. Their love did not shout its arrival. It rooted itself like prairie grass, strong beneath the surface, steady against the wind. And the town, once so quick to close its doors, learned something that season. Sometimes the loudest voice is not the truest one. Sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is ask a simple question and wait for the answer. Under that vast western sky, she was no longer the woman everyone turned away. She was the woman who stayed. And if you have ever felt judged before you were heard, if you have ever carried a story no one cared to ask about, remember this. There will be someone who chooses curiosity over rumor. Someone who sees your strength where others only saw shadow. Someone who asks the one question that opens everything. Hold on until you meet them. If this story touched something quiet inside you, take a moment to like this tale and share your thoughts below. Tell me where you are watching from. I would love to know how far these western winds have carried this story. And if you believe in slow love, in steady kindness, in the power of being truly seen, subscribe for more Wild West tales whispered like old memories beside a fire. Because out here, beneath the wide and waiting sky, no soul is too broken to belong.